A listener production.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here with you. Welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up on our deep dive, Donald Trump is gunning for a Nobel Peace Prize. The US president has been nominated by several countries, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
I want to present to you, Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee. It's nominating you for the Peace Prize, which is well-deserved, and you should get it.
Thank you very much.
There have been suggestions that Trump is using his new Gaza peace plan as a tactic to win the international recognition. And Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the Nobel Peace Prize shouldn't be the focus and that the issue here is peace and security for millions of people in the Middle East. That's the motivation, and that's the only consideration here. So, could Donald Trump actually win a Nobel Peace Prize? That's coming up. First, though, let's check the afternoon headlines. It's Wednesday, the 1st of October. A government shutdown has begun in the US after Congress failed to pass a spending bill for federal funding. The shutdown occurred after Democrats refused to support a Republican plan to extend funding for federal departments unless they won a series of extensions to healthcare benefits. But President Trump and Republicans were not willing to compromise. It's the first government shutdown in more than 6 years, with the last shutdown lasting 35 days back in late 2018 until early 2019 during Donald Trump's first presidency. Now, Trump has previously threatened to use the funding lapse to dramatically reduce the size of the public sector, as many offices will be shuttered, perhaps permanently, with the president vowing to do things that are irreversible, that are bad as retribution. 750,000 federal workers could be furloughed amid the shutdown. The Australian government has expressed deep safety concerns for Aussies on board a flotilla to Gaza, which is expected to be intercepted by Israeli forces. The Department of Foreign Affairs confirmed they had been in contact with 6 Australians believed to be part of the global Sumud flotilla, consisting of more than 40 ships headed to Gaza in an attempt to break the Israeli blockade. The Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs, Matt Thistlethwaite, saying Australia calls on all parties to respect international law and international humanitarian law and to refrain from any unlawful or violent acts against the flotilla. It comes as US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a peace plan for Gaza. And I'll pop the link to my deep dive on the plan in the show notes. And the AFL has announced it will be getting rid of the centre bounce in men's games from 2026 onwards as part of its rule changes for the next season. Instead of the umpires bouncing the ball in the centre of the field, they will now throw it into the air at the start of games and at stoppages, which has been the case in the AFLW since it started back in 2017. AFL Executive Football Manager Greg Swan says the decision will make it safer for umpires and players and lessen the likelihood of umpire contact. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with Allan Behm, a special advisor at the Australian Institute, a progressive think tank, on whether or not Donald Trump could win a Nobel Peace Prize, what that would do to the credibility of the award, and how the US president could be disqualified from being in the running. Allan, why is Trump gunning for a Nobel Peace Prize?
I think he wants to be in the pantheon of US presidents who've been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. 4 presidents have been awarded the Peace Prize, most recently Barack Obama, and Trump is nothing if not competitive. So he'd like to have himself down on that list along with Teddy Roosevelt and a few others, and that's why he wants it, I think.
So how does someone get a Nobel Peace Prize? What's the criteria that they have to meet?
Well, I could be facetious about that because if you look at the list of recipients of Nobel Peace Prizes, there is not a lot that links them all together. The prize itself is awarded by a parliamentary committee of the Norwegian Parliament. And so it depends a bit on the constitution of that committee, who's on it, what their hobbies are. During wartime, they haven't awarded it. Interestingly, the United States has been the most frequent recipient of it. And to this point, I don't think any Australians have ever won the Nobel Peace Prize, even though we've had a few people who might have been really very worthy recipients of it. So it's pretty hard to predict how they're going to award the prize. They do like to go for people who are underdogs, and then others of them have been enormously prominent citizens of the United States, say Henry Kissinger got such a prize, or they've been in very particular places, East Timor, for example. At the time that East Timor shook itself free of Indonesia, the prize was shared between a Catholic bishop and Ramos Horta, who was the president. So it's a funny collection of people, and yet sometimes you get extraordinary people who've gone through extraordinary things in the cause of peace. So it is a serious prize, but the rules for its award are not all that clear.
Talking about peace, Donald Trump recently said this about his nomination, that I have nothing to say about it. All I can do is put out wars, adding, I don't seek attention. I just want to save lives. What do you think he's talking about there?
You'd have to ask Donald Trump what he's talking about there, I think. It's a curious way of going about it, isn't it? This man who's much given to bluster and braggadocio saying, oh, shucks, not me. I'm just a humble servant of the people of the world going about sort of creating peace wherever I go. That's not his form. I think Trump is a person who is an attention seeker and would like nothing better than to get this sort of attention. His actions in just the last couple of days are quite consistent, I think, with that kind of attitude, in that he's seeking to create a ceasefire in the Middle East, in Palestine, which can't truly be a peace in current circumstances, because evidently Israel has not finished its business yet. And yet Trump is talking up a ceasefire as though it was the end of 3,000 years of constant struggle in Palestine. So I think that what we're seeing here is Trump continuing to angle for the Peace Prize and using all of the techniques that Trump is extremely good at using. He is in the forefront of many people's minds most of the time. And that's his technique. And as I say, he's very, very good at it, and would like to think, I guess, that he's a very strong contender for the Nobel Peace Prize if he were to bring about a cessation of hostilities and a withdrawal, at least from the use of armed force by Israel. And I think he imagines if he were to achieve that, he should get the Nobel Peace Prize.
So if Donald Trump did get a Nobel Peace Prize, what would that do to the credibility of the award?
Look, in my opinion, it would blow the credibility of the award right out of the water. In the first instance, it's never a good idea to have people barracking for themselves and being rewarded for it. Apart from Tom Gleeson winning a Golden Logie for the ABC, it's not commonly done. And good on Tom for being able to play the numbers, but in something like the Nobel Peace Prize, which is, after all, a pretty serious international award, self-promotion shouldn't be rewarded. I think the second thing that has got to be borne in mind here is that the problems of the Palestinians and the wish on the part of Israel to suppress Hamas and at the same time to deny to the Palestinians statehood, even if that war comes to an end, the outcome is not peace, and nor can it be peace, in my estimation, for a long time, because the preconditions for constant unrest, civil unrest, for acts of terrorism in Palestine have been set. You cannot destroy the infrastructure of a quasi-state. You can't impose the sort of suffering on the people of Palestine that we see in our media broadcasts every night of the week and imagine that it will just go away. It stays for generations. And so for that reason, I don't believe that irrespective of what might happen in the next couple of weeks, that peace is the end state of Palestine. It's simply a ceasefire.
And Trump's actually been formally nominated by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Does that add any weight to his chances of receiving this prize?
It may, because after all, Netanyahu is the Prime Minister of Israel. But I would have thought that the members of the Norwegian Parliament would see an alignment there between Trump and Netanyahu, with no independent third party around to say, hey, this is a really good idea. It's also the case that Netanyahu is himself subject to very serious questioning by his own law enforcement agencies and runs the risk of a big court action and possibly even jail after he completes his prime ministership. So his own credibility is probably not all that high. So in this case, I would expect that given the nature of the situation on the ground, given the nature of President Trump's own barracking for the award of the Nobel Prize to himself and the status of Prime Minister Netanyahu internationally, it would be a difficult thing for the Nobel Prize Committee to award the prize to President Trump.
And can someone be disqualified from being in the running for a Nobel Peace Prize?
I don't think so. I don't think it works that way. I think what happens is that they're politely dropped rather than being disqualified. For instance, were the Nobel Peace Prize Committee back in 1999-2000, I think it was, that awarded the Peace Prize to East Timor, to Ramos Horta and to Bishop Bello, had they known of the allegations of child sexual offences that were subsequently raised against Bishop Bello, I'd be very surprised if they would have proceeded to award the prize, for obvious reasons. So I think it's less a question of disqualification than it is of moving the nomination sideways when there are grounds to suspect that it might cast doubt on the integrity of the prize itself.
And moving into something a little bit different, we've seen celebrities kind of being donned with prizes and PhDs, and even David Beckham has received a knighthood, for example. What's the difference between getting something like a Nobel Peace Prize and then a knighthood?
Well, I think there's a lot of difference. The Nobel Peace Prize is really structured around highly significant actions on the international stage rather than things that happen on a national stage. So things like Orders of Australia or knighthoods in Britain or Presidential Medals of Freedom in the United States, which are generally speaking awarded to citizens for wonderful activities on behalf of fellow citizens within that state, and hence David Beckham, in the soccer-playing pantheon really, is worthy, I guess, of that kind of recognition. But it's not an international stage in the same way that somebody who brings about the cessation of a war or installs a peace plan, as actually happened in 1946 when General Marshall was awarded the Peace Prize, an American general who introduced the Marshall Plan, which was material to the economic and political reconstruction of Europe after World War II. They were very, very big international actions. And so that's what the Nobel Peace Prize is designed to recognise, even though from time to time it's awarded for things which might appear to be of a somewhat smaller scale.
And who is Donald Trump up against? The organisations or the humanitarian aid? Who could actually win a Nobel Peace Prize come October 10?
That's a really terrific question, Helen, and I don't know who he's up against. The list is not publicised. When the announcement is made, it is generally speaking a surprise, as it is for the Nobel Prize for Literature and so on. We can pick who might be candidates, but very often the prize is a surprise to everybody. But I would have to say that there are many things going on around the world at the moment where individuals are striving mightily to bring about an amelioration in the conditions of people. Right across Africa, there would be many worthy recipients of the Peace Prize, in my estimation. Quite a number in South America. There are certainly people who are working hard to restore peace in Ukraine and in other parts of the world. I think there would be quite a number of people on the list, but I don't think that there are any of them who are promoting themselves with the same sort of vigour that President Trump has been.
Allan, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you, Helen.
That was Allan Behm, a special advisor at the Australian Institute. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love it if you could subscribe wherever you're listening from or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.